All right, welcome back to the state of Web3 game development. So this is the show where we talk about what life is like as a game developer in Web3. And I've got my co-host here, Chris Heatherly. I am Jon Radoff, the CEO of Beamable. Chris is the leader of Mystery Society, a Web3 game. And our guest today is Sam. Sam is with Sequence, where they're building a middleware layer for all things blockchain, really, for your game. So why don't we actually kick things off right there, Sam? Like, let's talk a little bit about what you do, maybe what Beamable does. Like, what are the pieces that people really need to be able to do to launch a game? So we kind of think of ourselves as either backend or live ops, depending on how we want to describe ourselves in any given day. But why don't you talk a little bit about Sequence and what you do, and we can help people understand sort of what the tech stack should look like for a game development project, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you guys for having me. Good to be back with some friends. So I think maybe if I give just like a quick, Batman origin story, not only on myself, but just Sequence overall, help frame things.
Mhm.
So I've been in gaming my whole career. Used to help run Super Data Research, which was the largest provider of business intelligence and consumer insights in digital games. And we got acquired by Nielsen. I stayed at Nielsen for a while. And then I came into the Web3 side of the world, first at Animoca and running one of their companies, and then met the team here at Sequence about a year ago. And part of what drew me to Sequence was not only the team, but really the technology and what they've done, not just at this kind of like middle layer of tech, but also at the base layer of the blockchain. And I think, when developers, especially traditional game developers, when they think about the blockchain, it's this like very sort of amorphous, like misunderstood thing, which at the end of the day is just a database. We're just talking about storing information somewhere different, and in a way that is more scalable, more accessible than we would think of when we're talking about, traditional Web2 private game servers. And there's lots of opportunities in that. So whether it's helping with user acquisition or incremental monetization or retention, these are, sort of the universal challenges of gaming, whether Web2 or Web3. And we feel strongly that the blockchain helps with that. But to do that, as with anything else, like there have to be things that we address in terms of scalability. So we wrote ERC 1155 and 1271 and 6492. So not only kind of like fixing things at the base layer of the blockchain, but then saying, okay, how do we build the best building blocks for people to build any game that they want? And so I think, when I think of Beamable, we're both kind of existing in this world of far more flexible game development, right? Like there are more platforms, games monetize in more ways. They have different ways of reaching players. Obviously, we're talking about, the whole wealth of different genres and how you actually design a game and for whom. And we really are kind of that component that sits sort of side by side between, we think of maybe the blockchain at the base layer, and then, maybe your game engine somewhere at the top before you get to the player, and then Beamable and Sequence sitting in between, making sure that information is talking to all the information that it needs to be talking to, whether that's just like account creation, creating wallets, or transactions, or matchmaking, and some of the more kind of like complex in-game mechanisms as well.
Cool. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about what Beamable does to help sort things out for people. So when you're building a game, though, here's our version of the way you just described things. There's the front end of the game, which is Unity or Unreal. There's a few other engines that you can select these days, but those are the two largest ones in terms of market share today. And they've done a really good job of consolidating a lot of the things you need to do on the front end, whether it's physics or animation or graphics or pulling in models, having a script language around it. And then they've made it very extensible with things like marketplaces and asset stores where you can go and surf and find out all the things you might need to add to your game to just accelerate your game development process. So that's kind of the front end. And then you've got a back end. And in the back end, it remains this very, very fragmented world of everything from managing the data for your game, the inventory systems of your game, but actually just the game logic too. Like most games that are multiplayer online games, they have some kind of game logic on the back end that determines the rules of the game. And that's true whether you're a turn-based game, an asynchronous game, a real-time multiplayer game. There's some set of rules that governs the way people interact with each other. So having a capability for doing that in a server authoritative way is part of it. So like this is just a small set of the things you have to do. You could just keep adding to it: social systems, tournaments, leaderboards, matchmaking, some of the stuff you were referring to. So it's really complex. Usually what ends up happening with game developers is they create their own internal silo around those technologies. And what that does is it instantly puts them in the middleware business or the I don't know, the IT systems integration business. And it's continuous tech debt all the time. It's a distraction, frankly, from building a great game. So that's all the things that we set out to solve for at Beamable. And we came at it from the perspective that a lot of the requirements for Web 2 and Web 3 are actually very similar. Like you may need a matchmaking system, whether you're Web 2 or Web 3. You may need game server based rules if you're Web 2 or Web 3. You might need a chat system if you're a Web 2 or Web 3. Like those things are not fundamentally blockchain oriented. In fact, you know, a one parallel to think of it as like you don't really need like a blockchain game engine on the front end either. You don't need like someone to come up with a new version of Unity, but just for blockchain. That's kind of the way the back end is. You still need a lot of capability that's horizontal. We just so happen to have a lot of really cool blockchain integration kind of out of the box through our marketplace, but you've kind of taken that to the next layer in terms of really operationalizing things like marketplaces and things like that. Sam, could you just maybe expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the stack itself, and then I want to talk about some of the things that you mentioned because it really is, you know, the Web3 complement or you know the part of what you guys do that then needs to interact with the chain where you know we really fit into the equation. So we're Sequence is pretty unique in the breadth and full stack nature of it. You know, we sort of say like batteries included. So and this was another thing that really resonated with me when joining Sequence is I think for a lot of us who are used to game development, and then a lot of us who sort of saw the early waves of Web3 game development, things just weren't jiving in a way that felt natural to how games are made. And I come back to this constant refrain of like, you can't build half a game on Unity and half of it on Unreal and just hope for the best. It's not going to work. Your game won't work. And so what we saw in early Web3 was a lot of fragmentation of technology, or God forbid, people trying to make their own tech, which some still do, and good luck to you. But it was this really kind of like hackathon approach to game development, which was just never going to work because, as you just enumerated, like all these systems need to talk to each other, and that's whether it's Web 2 or Web 3, and you know the intersection of that becomes even more crucial. So what Sequence does is, you know, make sure that developers have 100% of what they need in terms of where their game touches Web3. And that's, you know, in-game embedded non-custodial wallets, it's in-game marketplaces, it's, you know, primary sales and secondary trading and transaction APIs and, you know, advanced analytics. I mean, it's a number of things, including kind of the more base layer elements like the indexer and relayer and the node gateway that allows all this to thrive. And there are Web 2 analogs to all that, right? Like, you know, the indexer, that's just your database query, right? And so when I think of a game developer building a game that happens to be Web3 enhanced in some way, and we get this question a lot. It's just like, well, how much of my game should be on chain? Like, well, kind of depends on what you're building and how, what you're optimizing for. But the fact is that I personally feel like fully on-chain games are kind of like a cool experiment that are never really going to work. But I think that, most people see this kind of middle ground where something like an off-chain, in-game action results in certain information that is stored on a backend that then informs something else, let's say matchmaking, right? So it's like, okay, where I am in terms of how I've leveled up in gameplay or what achievements I've conquered, or other kind of like skill-based information. And then there can be Web3 analogs or Web3 outcomes of that. So like, hey, once you've reached skill level such and such based on your gameplay, you can unlock this item that happens to be on chain, or you unlock this achievement. And so all those things are really down to, at this point, game developers to decide on. And then it's more just the question of like, okay, if you're putting it on chain, why are you putting it on chain? And that's where, in my opinion, kind of the fun stuff starts to happen, because then it's, okay, well, we know that having kind of ownership of items really helps with retention. We know that, players love to posture. I love to be able to show off to my community and my world my kind of like status or unique item, or something that I've achieved, and the blockchain happens to make it easier to do that, outside of just the little private world of the game. So those are the kind of net new player experiences and benefits that I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of. But it all starts fundamentally with, this kind of core unified, I mean, let's call it backend, both the Web3 and other side of the world, and it all needs to work together to have a game that's actually going to thrive. Because I'll say, like, sure, you could do on-chain matchmaking, but like, would you want to? That's kind of weird, So there's a lot you could jam down the blockchain, but there's not necessarily a lot of need for it.
Actually, we can come back to that. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sam, how much of what you guys, or how much of what you can do with Sequence can be done through APIs, as opposed to interacting with the chain directly? Because you can have your own custom smart contract with Sequence if you want, right? But you can also just use APIs and use your standard smart contracts through the APIs. Is that right?
Yeah, so obviously, like, everything in Web3 is a bit of a smart contract, so it depends on what kind of smart contract we're talking about. But if you said, for example, I want to build an in-game marketplace, just use our marketplace API. Now that's going to interact with the smart contract of a given collection or item. It's going to interact with the smart contract that is the wallet and the player account. A smart contract just being like, obviously, a series of, it's a code that tells the blockchain how to interact in the same way that, a whatever, like matchmaking widget, SDK or something would tell the front end like how to what results to surface. So everything we do is, or primarily through like SDKs and APIs, which is just how developers are used to developing. We don't want people like fishing around for the structures of how to fundamentally work with the blockchain, because most developers don't care about that. Their requirements aren't going to be that
right.
Fine-tuned. And so it's more just like, again, we think about a developer. I'm creating a series of gun skins, and these are the assets, and this is how it speaks to the database. And in this case, the database might be the blockchain, and that's servicing some of that information. But obviously, then in the back end, you've got the game backend and the engine actually putting that into a live game. It's just reading the source and information from somewhere else.
But if I want to, let's say I'm not innovating at the smart contract level, and I'm just, looking to use like standard deploy and use standard ERC20s and ERC 721s and ERC 1155s. I can do all that through your API, right? I don't need to have a blockchain engineer. I don't need a Solidity developer. I don't need all that in-house, right?
Better than that, because, again, as with anything that is code, security is important, particularly in this case where like there's potentially financial value tied to these items. And so, every smart contract needs to go through auditing, or what's called auditing. It's like, hey, is this safe and secure and work the way that it wants to do? And so beyond just working with our API, actually, because we have the Sequence Builder platform, which is kind of like a no-code developer console as well, a non-technical doofus like me, I can spin up, 1155 contracts on any chain with any royalty parameters that I want. I can, set up a collection, do my metadata tagging, and mint the items. And literally it takes me like a couple minutes to do this, and I'm not touching any code. Now, obviously, for people who are going to spend more time like integrating things natively into their game, code's going to get kind of be involved at some. It's the only way you're going to build a game.
Sure.
But yeah, for the stuff that I would say is like, why would a game developer be thinking about this anyway? We want to abstract that away. And so, no, you shouldn't be thinking about like paying someone to write a smart contract for you and then getting it audited. Like, just come in and make your collection. In the same way that, if like there's the marketplace API, if you want to make, a completely custom like in-game marketplace, but there's also the white label marketplace, like no code builder, and I can launch a customized, automatically royalty enforcing marketplace that works on, my chain with my native token, that also has NFT checkout and fiat on ramp and gasless transactions and everything else. And it'll take me 30 seconds to do if I've got my like banners where I want them to be. So it sounds so trite because like there's a lot of BS of like, oh, we just want developers to focus on making the game, but that's the reality. It's just we actually haven't seen the proof in the pudding of that until the 7 years of research and development that we did. And so I think we're finally at this place, just going back to the whole what's been the journey of Web3 gaming, where I truly think that people can build absolutely any game that they want. They can do it on any device, on any platform. And publish it in any way that they're used to, which is also why, and this will ring true to both you guys, like that's why we have and spent the time to get them officially verified, the Unity and Unreal SDKs, because for so long Web3 was relegated to this, browser landscape, which is like cool, but not where the biggest games on the planet live. And so there was this constant tension between, well, do I want to build a really great game or do I want to build a Web3 game? And, what that meant in terms of the engine and where the game would live and everything else. And now it'll be wherever you want it to be. And that's just exactly how game development.
So those SDKs will work on web, PC, mobile,
console.
Wherever you want to use Unity. Okay, yep. Even console. Wow.
Yep. And obviously we spend a lot of time, because we've done the heavy lifting. Consoles are late in terms of thinking about how to address Web3 games, but whether it's like a native mobile app and you're going to sell stuff through the app stores, like we know how to make your game compliant with the app store policies too.
So quick word here before we continue. And I've got so many questions about this that I think are really interesting to explore, but there's a whole bunch of people joining the live stream here in the live audience. I just want to remind everyone, this is your conversation. It's not just me, Chris, Sam here. So if you have a comment that you want to post, We're watching the LinkedIn comments, the X comments, I think maybe the Facebook comments. So, and the YouTube comments. So post a comment, and you have an opportunity here to ask 3 people who have been in game development for a long time to answer questions about your project or whatever's on your mind with respect to Web3 game development. And also, if you're a Web3 game developer or working on a technology that's relevant to game developers, this is also your platform, right? So we would love to have you come in. Just message me on X in a DM or on LinkedIn in a private message. I'm monitoring those. I could actually send you the StreamYard link. We'll bring you right on the channel. You can talk to us about what you're doing. So it's a live format for a reason, so that we can have that dynamic back and forth with the audience here. So Sam, one of the really interesting things about this is, I think, live ops. So I think a lot about live ops because as a former game developer myself, and hopefully a future game developer again someday, I think in terms of the KPIs around usage, engagement, monetization, all of that, the Web3 aspect brings in a whole interesting dimension to that in terms of being able to have insight into a whole body of data that you wouldn't normally have as say a free-to-play game developer on mobile. Can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that, like analytics to drive live ops? Like, what is the on-chain information that could potentially be harnessed by your platform, whether it's today or like in the vision of the company?
Yeah, and that is, oh man, I love that question because I could spend several hours talking about it. But I think, like, let's rewind back to obviously the days of traditional gaming, which are still very much here. But one of the things that one of the reasons why super data research existed is because there was no data. Like, I can't peer into EA's books and understand how they monetize and how many users they have and things like that, which also means that, as we've all dealt with, especially in a post IDFA world, that it might be increasingly challenging for me to target users. So I'll start there because in terms of like user acquisition, the blockchain being this universal database that anyone can look into is really incredible. Because now I can see someone's spending power. I can see what items they own. I can see, generally their activity, at least anything that's captured on chain. And so I can learn more about a player than I've ever been able to learn before and do it in, not with no gating. There's no monopoly of that information. It's just publicly accessible. And then, actually using that, which is something that we spend a lot of time, working on. It could be specific token gated offers. So I've identified a cohort of whales and they happen to own assets in a game of a genre that I think is similar to mine. And I want to present them with, a special item or, some token that's going to unlock some benefit for them in my ecosystem. And we know that, to kind of synthesize it, like the token is the most powerful user acquisition tool the internet's ever had. And it's still early days for how that's being utilized, but there's a ton of potential for developers who are facing a reality where their user acquisition costs have gone up 431%, but their player spend's gone up only 1%. And that again is like 431% since 2019.
Holy shit, are you serious?
Wild. It's wild, right? And again, and then
it's just that with the fact that it has nothing to do with the
just inflation. And then
you haven't noticed your eggs are like 4 times as expensive as they used to be.
Oh yeah, but UA is, it's not just up because of inflation, right?
John's trying to push Chris in a certain conversational
direction. Chris will talk about Polymarket. We're going to come to Polymarket.
Oh God. And so player spends up 1%, right? And those numbers just don't work out if you're a game studio trying to make it in this big scary world. So user acquisition, it's cheaper user acquisition, but then beyond that, it's retention and higher LTV and higher ARPU and all those good things. So even once you get a player, the likelihood of them being high value and sticky is even better. But just to talk again about, like, I think the net new experiences that excite me that we really haven't seen yet, and this is where like AI can come into the conversation potentially a bit, is how can a game customize itself based on what it understands about me the second I show up? Because suddenly this wealth of information is unlocked about me as a player. Again, my spending power, the items that I own. And so, let's say it's some kind of, I don't know, it could be an infinite runner, and the design of the game will actually shift based on, oh, Sam, it seems like you really like horror games, so we're going to give you like the horror dimension of this game, and maybe that's actually created on the fly based on other information that's in my wallet. So those are the things like that are just such untapped potential in terms of like player benefits that, of course, I think will ultimately reward developers as well.
It's funny you bring that up, because back quite a while ago now, I started a company called Gamer DNA along with my current co-founder of Beamable, Trapper Markells, and the whole idea was we got access to the Microsoft achievement feed what at the time was the Xbox 360. So we're getting all the achievements in real time that all the players on the platform were getting, and just that one piece of information allows you to have massive insights about how people interact with games. So we turned it into like a recommendation engine. We could see what kind of achievements you were earning, so we could say, based on this way that you're playing and the kind of games that you engage with, here's the games you should actually be playing. So really interesting things that can be done with that. Now, it does raise this interesting question, though, which is sort of the Web3 kind of crypto take on this. Is like transparency is good, having all this on-chain data is good. Like, I wonder how this is going to play with the mainstream gamer. Like, is that even potentially an impediment to adoption, though, if people start thinking of like, oh, all my on-chain events are going to be now something that game companies are going to look at to sell me a particular NFT or something like that in the game?
This is, man, it's the funny like cycle that we always get into with players, because if we think about the transition to free to play becoming mainstream, I mean, what did players say? Like, this is a scam, this is a cash grab, like literally the same words that they throw at Web3.
It's gambling.
And those players went on to spend $100 a month in FIFA Ultimate Team, only to have EA shut the game down every couple of years. And so, funnily, and then like you go back to even just the early days of digital games, like, well, what do you mean I don't own my disc and I can't resell it? So now we're giving people the opportunity to actually own their shit again, and they're like, I don't know, sounds like a scam. So we get into the same cycle with player sentiment every single time, and ultimately what wins out is how developers leverage it to provide benefits to players. I'm like, we're all gamers, and like discoverability is hard even for just me as a gamer. Like, wouldn't I love to be shown something that sounds super enticing to me when I'm looking for my next game, and bonus, because I'm like, a grandmaster at Apex, I'm going to get something extra special if I come into that game? That sounds like a massive player win. And so, as with any technology, it could be used for evil and it could be used for good. But I think, developers who will see the greatest success and the greatest longevity are going to be the ones who recognize that there's an opportunity to, let's say, entice players with things that are maybe even more tailored to them than they've ever been able to have before. And that feels like a good thing overall.
Hey, Sam, there's a use case you brought up way in the beginning, and you kind of poked at it as like you didn't see why people would need to put it on chain. But I want to play with some of those for a moment, because I think there are some really interesting applications of blockchain that actually have nothing to do with like the financial transactions on blockchain, and one of them that we've actually been looking at a lot is matchmaking, because the idea is if you have your match records on chain, then first of all, they're completely transparent to the players and everybody can see who won, who lost. And that information then becomes very trustable, right? You've got this whole history. So that's sort of an interesting one that we're looking at, because when I think about the composability of communities built around games, the ability to consume like match records, have you maybe even implement your own tournament platforms and things like that. It sort of brings this whole new dimension where the players can get a lot more involved in building around the game than they can currently. So that's something that we're looking at now. Maybe the same privacy issues is still there. Like I could see there being certain players that like opt out of putting my match records online, and that's fine. You'll be in sort of like the tournament league for players that don't want it recorded that way. But I suspect that like the really competitive players that want those records and want it like publicly known exactly what they won or lost, like when you level up to that and you're starting to participate in that, I think for a certain kind of player, that'll be really, really compelling. And the kind of community tech that you could build around that could end up being super interesting.
I totally agree. And that's why, I mean, I like your point of sort of the optionality being in the player's hands, which is kind of nice too, right? Because it's as with that anything, like I can opt into a more advanced experience with the game. Even to your point, like there's, you know, casual matchmaking and then there's ranked matches. Like maybe I'm not good enough to be in the ranked matches. Maybe I'm not good enough where I want to throw my win and loss data on chain. And I think that's, you know, that's where kind of like obviously developers really understanding their community and their players is key. And then to your point of like live ops iteration, you know, what you go to market with day one is not necessarily going to be where your game sticks around forever, or you might decide to add this on as a feature or a benefit for more, you know, advanced players a year into the game. And so it means that everything, you know, the back end and the Web3 side of it all need to be built nimbly enough to make it easy for you to do that, which is why, you know, we both do what we do. But I agree. I mean, I think it's more just a matter of, you know, there's a sort of now famous meme. I mean, it's more about like the friction of wallet technology where, you know, literally every bullet shot is like a transaction that someone's signing, and so on. It's like, you can do that. But, you know, what's the benefit of that to you as a developer, the benefit to the player in that instance? But I think you know, what you're also talking about is like, we're just in, how do players want to emblazon glory on chain? And that I think is, you know, status or something like that. And so, you know, we know that players like that. We know that players like to posture. And so I think there are a lot of different ways to do it. And then it's more in my mind about like, well, what's the outlet for that? Oh my God, it's my best friend, Eric.
Hey man, how's it going? I didn't know if you saw me.
Could this party get any better?
I was like, hey, Sam. I was like, I need to join this call. We have so many,
that's what this live stream's all about.
So many similar points of contact here, and this, like literally this week, I joined Beamable Discord, and you know, context. I was an indie developer. I worked with like Huton Games, worked on Playmaker, lots of other things in the Unity side. Know Photon, know those guys really well, and I'm looking for something different. And our buddy Mike Wallace, he said, look, I know the guys at Beamable. Reach out, check out what Beamable's doing. For context here, if anyone doesn't know Mike Wallace, he's the director of product at Sony PlayStation. Oversees live ops there. Huge name in the industry. Working on Helldivers 2. Works with us over at Uprising. He's like, go check out Beamable. And I'm like, okay. So a little bit kismet that we're here. And we also work with Sam on a bunch of different things and more in the future. So yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah,
and Mike is awesome. I got to know him when he was at Aptos for a bit, and before that, he was at Blizzard. Yes. We won't hold that against him though.
whatever happened to Diablo 4. So we'll let that sleeping dogs lie. But Helldivers 2 makes up for it. So it's been a fantastic one. We
and to everyone in our audience, just a quick note again. So let Eric be your example. Eric shot me a message on X and said, "Hey, I want to jump on, and I know Sam. Let me in. If you want to join this conversation, you can. It's a live stream. It's a live audience. It's live participation. I would love you to post questions on X or LinkedIn or wherever if you don't want to jump into the live stream. But if you're working on a game or you come from game development background or you're working on the tech stack to enable this, then by all means get here, because this is really the live stream for game developers, the people who are trying to learn about all aspects of game development. So Eric, tell us what you're working on a little bit more in here, and
I won't give you the whole pitch. We're launching a new gaming chain. And I know anyone in Web3, they're like, another one. This is my third chain. I was the head of product in Mantle before this. So if you hate L2s, hello, nice to meet you. But yeah, we're looking for a very specific problem to solve. And I think Beamable might be able to help us there. So we're working with Sam. We're looking to do embedded into it. We want to make sure that we can onboard people like stupid easy. We're bringing a lot of normies, quote unquote, into our game that we're launching here. And we're like, how are we going to do the back end here? We want to make it sort of anti-cheat proof as possible. So we're looking for, doing a certain amount of things in the microservices with Beamable, or possibly doing something, server side, something authoritative where we can reduce that. And I think as a game developer, for me, coming from the indie side, even when we did multiplayer, we used something that was like, client to client. It wasn't a big deal. We're not really that worried about people cheating. The minute that you add wallets and money and tokens and value, suddenly you can't do client to client. You need server-side authority, or you need to run things in microservices to validate outside of the game. So this is an interesting new challenge that I see a lot of game developers who've made indie games good at that, but now suddenly are faced with a new challenge of trying to sort of outfox or outsmart those people who want to exploit that part of the game, which becomes value extractive. So that's where sort of I come in. I think the cross-section of what you guys.
Yeah, there's the problem you just described is exponentially worse when you are dealing with real money transactions for hopefully obvious reasons. Like once people realize you can cheat and you make money from cheating, then the community implodes. Like everyone's just going to be mad and they're not going to want to play anymore. So if that gets out of hand, it's a problem. But the problem really exists in any game that hasn't taken being server authoritative really seriously. Like we see this all the time at Beamable. Like people come to us, for example, with idle games. Idle games happen to be a popular genre of a lot of the not Web3, but kind of Web2 games being built on Beamable. And idle games are pretty much a single player experience where you're just by yourself, and maybe there's some light social pieces that we've seen in some games. Mostly it's a single player experience where you're just kind of minding your own business. But guess what? If it's client authoritative, people cheat in those games like crazy. It's weird. It's like, for whatever reason, like hardcore RPG gamers and people who love to optimize and like really get into the resource scheduling. The next level beyond that is I'm going to now hack the game, and I'm going to look at the JSON messages being packed back and forth. I'm going to intercept it, edit it, and suddenly I'm in control. So if you don't have good server authoritative checks on that, you can easily cheat. And then as soon as it's really a community problem. Like if it was just a matter of a few rando hackers cheating in your game, it wouldn't be any worse than in a lot of like single player RPGs or something you might play in your game. But as soon as it's an offline game, people get apeshit about that. And they're like, oh, this guy cheated and got ahead and I didn't. And then either cheating takes off prolifically as people get all the scripts and stuff that automate for them, or they quit, right? Like those are the two bad things that can happen. But then in Web3, you had this additional element.
There's a huge honeypot there. there's a huge honeypot to do that, right? And if you're a professional, or a professional at hacking games, suddenly there's a good monetary reason to do that. You can make a living doing that. And in Web3, idle games really right now have taken off, especially with like Ton as an ecosystem.
Yeah.
We have like Hamster Combat, Not a Coin, or Not Coin. Like those games have taken off, and they're obviously heavily botted. That's part of the game, so to speak. But cheating, by manipulating the game code is sort of the next step to that. And there's
so this is an interesting this is an interesting distinction. So how, on your chain, I guess one question is, why did you decide to do your own chain as opposed to like just services? And I'm going to assume that part of the answer is, well, we can curate, we can look holistically at wallets on the chain, and if people are cheating, they can get banned across all the games they're working on or whatever. And so sort of how do you think about bots in that context, and how do you think about sort of cheaters versus botters?
So it's an interesting constant battle, and I won't name another game by name, but they say, okay, we have 1 million DAUs, and we know, for example, that
what game can you be talking about? I don't know.
Yeah, a game. They say they have 1 million DAUs, right? And then we know it's like 90%, 95% bots, and that's part of the game. And in many ways, that is social proof, right? That they are popular within the Web3 ecosystem. Like I'm not that hard to do even still. However, my primary concern, and what our concern as a chain, is when it comes down to rewards, especially as we reward bots and people who work through that sort of an ecosystem, that becomes the issue. So for us, we are working with Polygon ID. Sorry guys, I'm calling it out here, and they recently put off from Polygon. They're doing their own thing, and so the balance is, how much do we KYC that we're not chasing people away, versus how light can we do KYC to reduce that aspect, so we have a balance between, yes, players are coming in, they still feel comfortable, versus I don't want to hold up my government ID because this is totally against why I came to blockchain in the first place, right? And so how do we figure that out? And that's balancing acts that we're looking at. Yeah, for us as a chain, we are definitely what I would consider like a boutique chain, similar to Ronin, Gala, that type of thing, where we play more of a publisher type model than essentially what, say, like IMX, where they're just like, okay, we have everything across the board, everyone's welcome, and that's sort of how we do it. So that's a whole longer story, but yeah.
So you're looking to do not a permissionless chain, but a permission.
We are permissioned. We are 100% gasless. That's our core philosophy. Quality, content quality only, really. And
what are you building it on top of?
We're building on top of Oasis. I'm actually the VP of ecosystem at Oasis. So we work with like Bandai Namco, Sega, Square Enix, Ubisoft. Like I just did an AMA with Ubisoft like 2 days ago with the Wolf Styles guys, talking about Ubisoft's new project, because they're taking some interesting risks. And so Web3 was sort of interested in why they're doing 45,000 NFTs while other games are doing like 2,000. And for Ubisoft, just not to segue too much, but they're like, yeah, everyone who plays a game is going to need an NFT. So we don't want, people have to pay like several $1,000s to play our video game. We want there to be NFTs out there for people to play and enjoy it. So yeah, I mean, props to Ubisoft and shout out to those guys for building early, taking risks, breaking things, rubbing shoulder to shoulder with everyone who's out here building them, instead of swooping in like 5 years after the fact and being like, oh, all the indies have done all the hard work, figured out works, figure out how the monetization is going to work, have built everything, and now we're just going to come in and, like on top of that. So Yeah.
Hey, I want to welcome a couple new guests to the. I mean, we're rocking the live stream today. This is great. This is exactly what we're trying to pull off with this show. So if you're a Web3 game developer, if you're working on the tech side, please join us here to talk about what you're working on. So Rob from Simply Stream and Alex, we'll start with Rob. Why don't you just do a quick intro, and then Alex, and we'll get to what you're working on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having us. So yeah, I'm with Wonder Interactive, and we've built out Simply Stream. So the Simply Stream platform, and what we're doing is we're essentially allowing app developers, game developers, to bring their high fidelity applications to the web. So we have support for various engines right now. The best support, where we started was with the Unreal Engine. So we have support for Unreal Engine 5.4. So I think things like Lyra, for instance, running in the browser without using pixel streaming. So this is going to allow, well, I guess I'll probably cut it off there because I think Alex still needs to introduce himself. And
yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Thanks. Yeah, no, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, John. Super excited to take part in this discussion. I'm one of the co-founders of Wonder Interactive, and really our vision is to help break down barriers and make gaming more accessible. And the way to do that, not only the Web 2 world, but the Web 3 gaming world, is actually to embrace open platforms such as the web. And really, there's been a disparity between native platforms and what you can do in a browser. And our goal is really to enable web apps that feel and play and perform just like their native counterparts on console and PC. And we're developing a platform called Simply Stream and a suite of tooling to enable that. Some of the secret sauce, not so secret, is WebGPU and WebAssembly, although we have a mix of different backends. And I just want to kind of speak a little bit about the strength of the browser as a platform. As you guys know, Steam and some of the app stores, I know the app stores are now opening up for allowing token-based games, but platforms like Steam actually don't allow NFT games or Web3 games. And the Epic Game Store is more of an open position. But we really believe that developers shouldn't be kept behind gated ecosystems, and they shouldn't have to pay 30% of every transaction in a token-based economy game. That and benefits like direct integration with MetaMask or other Web3 frameworks or tooling such as Beamable, making it super simple, permissionless gaming so that users can share and embed their games anywhere, and it's just enabling developers to have that direct to consumer relationship online. I really think that's a key component in Web3, and yeah, super excited to showcase one of our very first demos, which is quite a milestone for the team. But super excited to talk more about the web, putting the web into Web3.
Yeah, I mean, I think it totally makes sense. First of all, like the web browser should be able to access any kind of software.
Yeah.
I mean, the web is the metaverse in my version of what the metaverse is. It's this connective tissue that ties everything together, and it's about adding a social layer and our digital identity and a lot of these more cultural aspects of how you experience the web. But the web can interconnect everything. So I think Web GPU is really your enabling technology, though, right? Isn't that the tech that has sort of made it possible to deliver real 3D rendering through the browser?
That is one of the big components. There are other big components that have been missing in the browser, surrounding, file systems and like memory usage, right? So like, for instance, if you slap on Web GPU on Unreal Engine, on an Unreal Engine project that, takes a few gigabytes of memory or 16 gigabytes of memory, or something along those lines, it could take a while to load up, right? And it might not even fit within the memory budget of the device that it's running on. Maybe you have a Chromebook or an Android mobile device or something like that. So one of the big things we worked on, and actually what we spent and our where we've invested most of our efforts, I would say, is in the streaming nature of the platform. So the virtual file system and all that. So, but yeah, web GPU is definitely a big component.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. Like one of our first titles, and you guys have it like pegged. You have it absolutely pegged. We're working on an idle clicker. I hate to say it, but we're working on an idle clicker. It's a great introduction to blockchain.
Hey, idle
for
clickers
sort of
are great games. I love cooking.
normies. It's not our core concept, so we're working how we're going to bring it in. And as we were publishing it out, we're like, what format are we going to do this on? And okay, let's move to Unity 6. I want to do it as a PWA. I want people to be able to install it on their phone, like natively. I want them to be able to install it onto their PC by clicking in the corner. I want them to play it in a browser. And I am super excited for WebGPU to like get to a further point where that access barrier gets low so much that I don't have to install something risky on my PC. Because currently with Web3 games, they'll send you a file and they'll be like, download and install this, put your wallet on. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that, guys. So if we can add launchers, or we can use launchers that are completely web-based, I'm totally all for it, as that becomes sort of the ultimate distribution method versus like, hey, look, you've got to download Steam and do it from there. And a lot of our customers, I don't Steam. So they're like, I've got a PlayStation, I don't use Steam, or they might the other way around. So if we can do web-based, for sure that becomes a mass distribution. And for us, that's already excited about. So
yeah, to give people an idea, I mean, my game is in Unity, but it's a 2D game, so it shouldn't be, too hard to get onto mobile devices. But we tried the PWA route, and it just wasn't with the current Unity technology. Now with Unity 5, they're going to, I think it's Unity 5, the new the big upgrade that's coming. They're going to have better web GPU support and better PWA support, allegedly. But right now, like it didn't work at all for our game. So we could not
Unity 6 beta. Yeah, we're using the Unity 6 beta, which is added it natively.
Yeah, Unity 6, that's it.
And the first thing I did is I sent Sam a message and I say, how well are your wallets going to support this? And they said, let's do it. So it literally like the next day I sent Sam a message saying, like, I want to make sure that my wallets work and this new Unity 6 web of PWA. So will you guys
and I think
tried the web 6?
Some of this, some of what comes up to me when we think about like the platforms and how games are distributed. I mean, I think it's sort of what we were talking about earlier. It's like separating, particularly when we're talking about Web3, it's separating the limitations that had been previously presented by Web3 technology, which was like everything was browser based. So go fuck yourself if you want to build a native, mobile or, web app, Unity app or Unreal app, particularly on, as a native mobile app or whatever else. And then it was, the store policies too. And so like, while I agree, it's great for developers to be able to exist outside of those worlds. I think it always just needs to be a separation of like, well, why is this happening? Because also if we think of like, where do most players go to find the games that they want to play? Well, they're on the app stores and they're going to Steam and, they're finding games. I mean, this is why they are distribution platforms in the way that they are. But then we also talked about like the benefits that Web3 brings to user acquisition that would be agnostic of any, walled garden. So I think we're all talking about like the right things, which is sort of like flexibility for developers and players. But when developers are always going down a particular path, it's, I always just take a step back because it's like, well, why are you doing this? Because sometimes it's founded on, inaccurate or like incomplete data of the latest innovations. Because if someone's like, hey, I'm an Unreal developer and like, that's what I do, then by all means do it. Like build your Web3 game on Unreal.
Hey, I wanted to maybe make a quick segue into a completely different topic, especially now that we've got a bunch of people in here because it's just timely and interesting. But for anyone who is interested in the web GPU stuff, definitely check out what the guys at Wonder are doing. And I also wrote an article where they are referenced. I wrote this a few months back. It's about web GPU and how the web could eat software. I just posted the link. There's a nice little bit.ly link there if you want to find the article. But I think that this is one of the things that could really disrupt the whole game distribution ecosystem over the next few years. Okay, so on to a slightly different topic. So we got to talk about Polymarket because this thing has been going crazy the last week especially. And there's a particular bet that's in there that's driving a lot of activity. We're not a political stream, so we're not going to really. This isn't an invitation to weigh in on the politics of that, but I think it's really interesting what's happening there because it's an actual, very legitimate use case of the technology. And Chris, I know you've been thinking a lot about this. Do you want to just sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I suggested we talk about Polymarket because I think it's one of the DApps that simultaneously is getting a lot of mainstream attention and not really getting talked about a lot in Web3. So this is, for those who don't know what Polymarket is a betting prediction market. And so you can vote on different questions of the day. You can see right now it's heavily dominated by things around the election and speculation on who the Democratic candidate may be. But what's interesting is that I've seen at least half a dozen polls articles over the last 24, 48 hours talking about Polymarket and how, and how people are betting in these betting markets. And it's shaping, politicians' thinking even around, whether Biden should stay in the race or not, which I think is interesting because it's kind of real-time democracy in a way. You can see a lot of ways that it could certainly go wrong, but they've got things, they've got other things, right? They've got not just the US election, but the UK election, the French election, crypto prices, sporting. So you can bet on virtually anything, pop culture, all kinds of stuff. I'm looking at the pop culture tab now. There's a bet going on around will the US confirm that A-Leagues exists this year? So there are a lot of things that you can bet on. And then the other thing I was going to show real quick is I want to show the Dune dashboard for, if you could throw that up, John. This is the Dune dashboard. This is a Dune dashboard on Polymarket. You got it up?
Hold on. Here we go.
Yeah. So here you can see last month. This is their monthly volume, and you can see last month they did 111 million in revenue last month. And they did that with roughly, it's 29,000 traders, monthly active traders. So, I mean, you can see like the volume is going through the roof. And this is July, of course, this is only July 1. We're on July 3. So there's a little bit of data, there's only 3 days of data here. It's real-time data, but you can see that, already like, we're already at a meaningful amount relative to the main number. So, like anytime you have an application in Web3 that's doing $100 million a month, I think you have to look at it and say, hey, something's going on here. What I think is interesting is that if you talk to Web3 people, they're very down on Polygon and the Polygon chain, but largely, I think because it's not, we could talk about why, but I think a lot of that has to do with Polygon has been around for a while, and they're not giving out a lot of token airdrop incentives or all these things that kind of get people hyped up in the Web3 community, but they have actual applications that are launching on their chain and making lots of money. So anyway, I think it's really interesting. It's also a crypto product that isn't a traditional, like it's not using NFTs or ERC20s or, you know, like standard crypto. It's using the blockchain for their bets, but it's as far as I know, a custom, kind of a custom approach. So, but it shows that that you can be innovative with blockchain, and you don't necessarily have to do kind of the, you know, the traditional, you know, NFT or token kind of model. I mean, you know, it's similar to like the crypto keys that are being sold in Frintech. If you know Frintech, where you could buy keys to be in somebody's chat group, you know, those are not ERC20s or anything like that either. They're you know, kind of a custom implementation. So it's interesting to see people kind of doing new things outside of the norm with blockchain and it taking off.
It's
And I
kind of
think
innovation too.
there's, you know, the thing that I think Polychain or some of the things you're bringing up, Chris, show is, yeah, I think it's these net new use cases. It's also the, you know, it's the logistical abstraction that the blockchain can provide. And I think, you know, in terms of gaming, and not that like Polyland or Frentech, you know, are exactly these things, but, you know, in gaming, I think a lot more games want to integrate user-generated content, for example, because wow, what a huge benefit. I mean, it's a benefit because the more your players participate in your world, the stickier they are, but also, hey, it takes a lot off your, you know, live ops roadmap if you can hand over keeping things fresh to your community. But if you think of like, well, why has UGC only really been done by Unreal and Roblox and, you know, a little bit Minecraft? It's just because they have the lawyers and the developers to go through the insane logistical hurdles of, you know, accounting and creator payouts and everything else that the blockchain actually handles for you, you know, and money transmitter licenses and you know, all of that. And so, you know, I think that's something where, again, developers are kind of like, well, I could do all this in Web 2. It's like, no, you can't, dude. Like, go do it. You know, prove to me that you have the legal and developer resources to handle this. And we would see more games with the UGC. I mean, that's just the fact. And so, you know, the blockchain takes some of these challenges off the plate of the developers in a way that lets them actually do what their, you know, community wants, and have the potential to participate in the upside of it from a revenue perspective. Why did Psionic shut down, you know, skin trading in Rocket League? Peer-to-peer transactions on a Web 2 server are really hard to handle, and we couldn't figure out how to make money from it. And they take away skin trading, which we've all been told Web 2 developer, you know, players don't care about, and everyone lost their minds and tried to boycott the game. So, you know, these are.
But Sam, why not just put it in a database?
Just a database.
Why can't you use a database?
Why don't you just sell your whole account one? Because that seems like a safe, efficient way of doing
safe.
Things.
It's definitely a high trust scenario. Yeah, I mean, this is why like major streaming influencers have to get involved in the sell of Crossfire items, because you know, seller and buyer have no trust of each other. Well, yeah.
Well, what's
there's no law of physics. There's no law of physics that says there isn't a way you could just do it without blockchain. It just so happens that blockchain is the best way we found to do these things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Standards.
But if you're on LinkedIn, as we all are, right, and you post anything about Web3, you will get the morons in your comments who are like, you know, why don't you just do it with the database? Why do you need blockchain? And I wish I would pay extra to give those people like an electroshock every time they put. It's just like, you know what I mean? It's like I could use a shovel as a fork, but like, you know, I mean, you can do all kinds of things with the wrong tool.
It's funny because, I mean, a lot of us got into blockchain because we're like, oh, privacy preserving, cross-chain, cross-country payment. It's like, it's not even that. It's just standards. It's standards that we've agreed upon to a certain degree, and that we're all electing to use. And I can put my NFT as a game item into an NFT, and there's like 100 different marketplaces there that support that standard. Now I never need to build my own marketplace to buy and sell. People can rent it, they can loan it, they can track, do whatever the hell they want with it. I don't have to worry about it. And it all comes down to trustless standards, right? And that's essentially the thing for me. So how did my intern get into the chat? Yeah, so Kearney's my social media manager. He'll cause problems if you let him, but that's why we hired him. So for me, it comes down to permissionless standards, trustless standards. That's what blockchain brings as a game developer. Just throw it in there, and you know the tools are going to be developed for you that are out there already.
I think, you can blow that up to, again, another like universal problem in gaming overall, which is, player trust around the future of a game. And so, we could talk about like distributed, game hosting and handing over, control to the community and things like that. Because again, like if you're EA, you shut down a game every year like clockwork, and all the money that people have sunk into it and everything else just goes, and all the status, not just the money, but like the status, which is what players want, go out the window. And so now we have the potential to solve for that, which is even more vital when there's financial value, tradable value inherent in the ownership of these items. But that's something that gaming has been grappling with for forever, right? And so, this is, again, it's like not necessarily the sexy use case, but it's the one that's going to make players feel, much more special. And that's something that always comes around to help developers too.
Well, and even if the game is dead, one of the things that people are starting to do in these points programs is they're starting to do wallet profiling and looking at the quality of the wallet, and whether it's like a bot or whether it's a holder, or whether it's is this wallet a wallet that's played a lot of games before. And, if you look at like Magic Eden in there, when they did their points program, like one of the smart things they did is give people rewards based on the quality of their wallet. So if you've been an NFT trader, over on OpenSea, like they gave you a lot of rewards to connect your wallet and come over to Magic Eden. And suddenly you've got, a lot of incentives to engage with their platform, but they're doing it with a very targeted user that they know based on behavior is a spender, somebody who has bought NFTs or traded NFTs or traded crypto in the past. And they can even look at, like, do you hold or do you sell? Right. And so, you can apply that to gaming. I was going to say this earlier when you were talking about storing like, win-loss records and things like that on the chain. You can give people credit for things they've done in other games, as long as that's in a format that everybody can look at. You can give them credit for things that they've done in other games, or qualify and target them in all kinds of ways, knowing that, that they're a gamer and that like I think for most of us in Web3 right now, like we're just looking for players because there's a lot of speculators in the space. And, it's super valuable just to even know this wallet belongs to somebody who has played, who has any gaming NFT.
If I can push in there, we're doing that. I helped Ubisoft distribute thousands of NFTs for their upcoming game Champion Tactics through Oasis. And they said, put these in the hands of players, put these in the hands of people who are holding their NFTs. And we did that. We looked at the wallets, we looked at what people were holding, we looked at whether they played the games to the best of our knowledge and figured that out. And so those people got, those NFTs at the time worth like $400 or $500 Ubisoft NFTs for doing nothing other than playing other games and being real players. So we're already doing that as much as possible. So there's value.
And just a shout out to Ubisoft. It's a sequence-powered game, and they're also investors of ours. But yeah,
they work on our chain
for helping with that.
Oasis,
But one of the other things, again, like I think a lot about this, not only from the perspective of being a professional in the space, but also as a player. Like, how many of us have been in like an unskippable tutorial where it's just like the most basic shit, like it's just target practice or something like that, and it's like, can you not look into my wallet and recognize that based on my achievements and everything else, like I'm a seasoned player and I can probably skip, at least this part of your tutorial. It's such it's such a small thing, but it would delight my experience, and I'm now playing your game faster. I'm getting more stuck into the game as opposed to like dealing with some tutorial. That's a really powerful mechanic that no one's really tapped into yet.
So then,
Hey,
how do we? One last thing, then, as John said earlier, how do we target that versus now everyone knows your transactions as a gamer and says, hey, I'm going to sell you this Helldiver shirt that was printed, for 2 cents in China, and now we're going to try and sell it to you. So there is that aspect that is definitely coming as well. Sorry, John, to you.
Yeah, no worries. I want to thank everybody for coming to the conversation today. This has been great, really the most dynamic conversation we've had since we launched this series a few weeks back. So I want to thank everybody who came live on the live stream, everybody who posted a comment or question. Want to especially thank everybody who tuned in to watch this, because your time is super valuable and you chose to spend it with us. And we really appreciate that. We hope you'll come back again. We're going to do this show weekly, although next week on Wednesday, I'm flying to Japan. I'm going to Bit Summit in Kyoto, and I'm going to spend a few days in Tokyo. And that's so I can't do this from an airplane, according to what the FAA has told me about live streaming from planes. So I won't be able to do it next week, but we'll return to the regular schedule, which is 4 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday after that, and most weeks where Chris and I are able to do it. And all of you who showed up today, Sam, Alex, all of you, you're welcome to come back anytime. Rob, Eric, well, thanks so much for joining us for this. And so for now, we're going to sign off and go back to building games and Web3 game tech. Thanks, everybody.
Rock and roll. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
Bye.